Hey, welcome back to the channel. Now today I want to talk about audio technology and the way audio have evolved over the last 50 years or more, from the days of reel-to-reel tapes and vinyl down to the turntable and CDs and the mini disc player, cassette deck, and all of those technologies up to the point now where we are just listening to basically we are just streaming, with the occasional playback of physical media. Audio technology, two-channel audio has really evolved over the last 50 years. So I just thought I would just sit and just kind of reminisce and kind of go through the evolution of audio. I'm 62 now, and so I kind of lived through it all, so to speak. I never owned a lot of audio gear as a youngster, but I was able to kind of see the transition through the years. So let's talk about it, guys. All right? So stereo and two-channel audio have been the backbone of music production for, I would say, more than half a century now. While surround sound and immersive formats have, gained popularity, stereo remains the most enduring and influential standard. Its evolution reflects not only the technological progress, but also cultural shifts in how people consume, and value music nowadays. From the analog warmth of vinyl in the 1970s to the AI-driven personalization of today, stereo technologies have continually adapted to meet the needs of listeners. This little talk explores the defining innovations across 5 decades or more, examining their technical foundations, cultural impact, and lasting legacy. So, that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's dive into the 1970s. The 1970s are often remembered as the golden age of analog stereo. Vinyl records were the dominant format, prized for their rich, warm sound and tactile qualities. Turntables became the centerpiece of home audio systems, with brands like Technics and Thorens, and dual producing high fidelity equipment that emphasize precision and durability. Stereo playback allowed listeners to experience music with spatial depth, separating instruments across the left and right channels, creating a sense of immersion that, monophonic systems could not achieve. Stereo receivers and amplifiers from companies like Pioneer, Marantz, Sansui defined that era. These devices emphasize dynamic range and clarity and warmth, cementing two-channel systems as the, kind of the standard for home listening. Cassette tapes also, emerged during this period, offering portability and convenience, right? Now, although their fidelity was lower than vinyl, cassettes foreshadowed the coming revolution of personal audio by making music more mobile and accessible. All right, so let's go into the 1980s now. The 80s, ushered in the digital age with the introduction of the compact disc. Launched in 1982, CDs offered durability, portability, and digital clarity. Now, unlike vinyl, CDs were resistant to wear and provided, consistent playback quality. Two-channel stereo playback was preserved but enhanced with digital precision, kind of making CDs the preferred format for mainstream audiences. CD players quickly became household staples, replacing vinyl for many listeners. And though audiophiles continue to, value analog formats for their warmth, CD playback became quite common. Now, personal listening devices also rose to prominence during this decade, and we're talking about the 80s now. Sony's Walkman popularized stereo headphones, shifting music consumption from communal experience to a more individualized ones, so to speak. For the first time, listeners could carry their music with them and create personal soundtracks for daily life, if you know what I mean. Integrated stereo systems combining CD players, cassette decks, and amplifiers also became common in homes, while surround sound began to emerge in cinema. Despite these developments though, stereo remained, the dominant format for music. Right? Now, during the 1990s, moving on, stereo technology underwent refinement and expansion. Digital signal processing allowed the manipulation of stereo signals for equalization, effects, and spatial enhancements. This innovation gave listeners greater control over their audio, their audio experiences, and allowed manufacturers to design systems that could adapt to different environments and preferences. Now, Sony's Minidisc, introduced in 1992, offered digital recording and playback in a compact format. Now, although it never achieved the widespread success of CDs, the Minidisc showcased the innovation in portable stereo technology and appealed to niche markets, if you know what I mean. Audiophile culture flourished during this decade, with enthusiasts pursuing high-end stereo equipment and reviving, interest in tube amplifiers and vinyl records. Stereo listening became both mainstream and an activity, and specializing in the pursuit of fidelity, reflecting the diverse ways people engage with music. The 2000s were defined by the MP3 revolution. Remember that? Compressed digital audio transformed stereo listening by enabling portable digital libraries. MP3 files allowed listeners to store thousands of songs on small devices, fundamentally changing the relationship between music and portability. Apple's iPod, launched in 2001, redefined personal listening, making it possible to carry entire music collections in one's pocket. Stereo earbuds, became cultural icons, symbolizing the new era of individualized music consumption. Now, while surround sound gained traction in home theaters, stereo systems remained essential for music purists. The simplicity and intimacy of two-channel playback continued to appeal to those who valued fidelity and authenticity. The MP3 revolution also raised questions about audio quality, as compression often sacrificed detail. This tension between convenience and fidelity became a defining theme of the decade. As we move on into, say, the 2010s. The 2010s brought streaming platforms to the forefront of stereo listening. Services such like, Spotify, Apple Music, and Tidal revolutionized access to audio, making two-channel playback, cloud-based and on demand. Listeners no longer needed to own physical media or even digital files, right? Instead, they could access vast libraries instantly. This shift emphasized access and personalization over ownership, reshaping cultural norms around music consumption. Let's talk about wireless technology. Wireless technologies also, reshape listening habits. Bluetooth headphones and speakers proliferated, eliminating the need for physical connections and, offering unprecedented conveniences. High resolution audio formats such as FLAC catered to audio files emphasizing fidelity and detail in stereo playback. The decade marked the convergence of convenience and quality as listeners demanded both accessibility and superior sound. All right, so that was the 2010s. Now in the 2020s, AI, artificial intelligence, began to redefine stereo and two-channel audio. AI-powered sound optimization allowed systems to adjust playback based on room acoustics, listening position, and even user preferences. Smart speakers integrated AI chips capable of real-time processing, learning from user behavior, and evolving over time. These devices delivered adapted and personalized experiences, making high quality audio more accessible to everyday users. Now, also during that time, immersive stereo experiences also emerged through binaural recordings and spatial audio, integrating with virtual and augmented reality platforms. Sustainability became priority, right? With manufacturers emphasizing eco-friendly materials and energy-efficient amplifiers. Compact, minimalist designs dominated consumer preferences, kind of reflecting a broader cultural trend towards simplicity and sustainability. The technical evolution of stereo systems over the past 50 years have been remarkable. Amplification transitioned from analog tube amplifiers to solid state and eventually digital designs with Class D amplifiers, introducing efficiency and compactness. Speaker design advanced through new driver materials, improving stereo imaging and precision. Connectivity evolved from RCA cables to optical, HDMI, and wireless connections, integrating stereo systems into smart home ecosystems. These developments ensure that stereo technology remained relevant even as new formats emerged. Stereo technology has not only advanced technically, but also reshaped cultural practices. Music listening shifted from kind of a communal experience to more personal soundtracks, with headphones becoming symbols of independence and individuality, if you know what I mean. Streaming established new norms for consumption, emphasizing access and personalization over ownership. Stereo systems became both cultural icons and everyday tools, reflecting broader changes in how society interact with media. Right? Now, throughout these decades, these 50 years or more, audiophiles have continued to pursue fidelity in stereo playback. Vinyl records and high-resolution digital formats, have learned to coexist, offering different path to sonic purity, so to speak. Turntables, tube amplifiers remain popular among enthusiasts, while streaming services now provide lossless stereo options to kind of satisfy the demand for quality. The audiophile perspective underscores the enduring appeal of stereo as a medium for experiencing music in its most authentic form. So, as we kind of finish this little talk, stereo and two-channel audio technologies have defined the listening experiences for half a century. From the analog warmth of vinyl to the AI-driven precision of smart systems, each era introduced innovations that reshape both cultural and technical landscapes. Now, while surround sound and immersive formats continue to grow and get more common, stereo remains the foundation of music listening, kind of embodying tradition and innovation alike. The next decade promises further integration of AI, sustainability, and personalization, ensuring stereo's enduring relevance in the evolving world of audio. So that's it. If you enjoyed this video, kind of reminiscing and going down, to go down memory lane, so to speak, looking back at all these technologies over the years up to the point where we are now. If you enjoyed this, this little talk, give me a thumbs up. And what's your recollection? What can you relate to in terms of how you listen to music back in the day? Are you someone in my age group? I'm in my 60s now. What was your first stereo system? Tell me about it. What was the first piece of audio gear that you can recall that you actually owned? Tell me about it. And like I said, if this brought back any kind of nostalgia to you, so to speak, as we kind of reminisce on the good old days. Debatably. Give me a thumbs up. All right, if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. This is unconventional, the unconventional sound. So until the next video, thank you for watching. All right, bye bye.